Question. Why are Native Americans generally so resistant to change? In Canada, we have a situation where we spend $25 billion on our military, and we also spend about $40 billion on what they call reconciliation. All of this, and the indigenous communities constantly complain about how oppressed they are. They never seem to want to take responsibility or make their lives better. Why is this, and what can be done in the long term? Well, I think let's just take this discussion beyond Native Americans or Native people in other parts of the world. Because it isn't just a matter of Native people that are resistant to change. You look at the world and you see that there are certain regions of the world where the vast majority of people are resistant to change. They are holding on to a worldview that was formulated perhaps hundreds of years ago, and they don't want to let go of it, even though the world is constantly moving on. So the real explanation for this, if you step back, is, as I've explained in my video about how the world was created, that there came a point where the Earth made a shift from being a natural planet to being an unnatural planet. And on a natural planet, all of the beings who embody on a natural planet, they are growing. They are transcending themselves. But on an unnatural planet, the reason it becomes an unnatural planet is that there are many people who don't want to grow. They don't want to transcend themselves. They want to hold on to certain conditions. And what they're really trying to hold on to is a certain experience, a certain life experience. And after the Earth made that shift to become an unnatural planet, there were groups of beings that came from other planets and started embodying here, that are not the original inhabitants of the Earth. So now you have, when you look at humanity, you have a very diversified picture. You have still a large part of the people who are the original Earth inhabitants, who haven't yet really taken responsibility for their growth. And they can also be very conservative and unwilling to change. But you also have certain other groups of people that have come from other planets. And the reason why they came from these other planets was that those planets moved on. They reached a certain level where the growth or the majority of the beings on the planet was ready to kind of create one of these transitions where the planet shifts to a higher level. But there were still these groups of people who were not willing to grow with that. They were not willing to follow the majority. So they could no longer embody on those planets, and therefore they came to Earth. And so there are these, they are sometimes called laggard evolutions because they are lagging behind, that are embodying many places on Earth, and not just indigenous people. And what is common for all of them is this victim consciousness. Very deep, subtle victim consciousness. That something is not right, something is not doing what they should be doing, or something is doing something to them that they shouldn't do. Even God is not really doing what God should be doing to them. So they all have this sense of they are oppressed or opposed by forces beyond their control. And they are victims of this. And they don't want to let go of the victim consciousness. And therefore they can't move on with society. And they're trying to stop society. And many of them have constructed this, like you see in some Native American groups at least, that they are victims of the white people. And they should be forever compensated for this, instead of just simply moving on and realizing that even if no white people had come to America, the Native Americans still will not be living today like they did 500 years ago. They would not be hunter-gatherers today. Things would have moved on in America some way. So what can be done with it in the long term is raising the collective consciousness. And this is what many spiritual people are engaged in doing. This is what is our role as spiritual people on the planet, is to raise our own consciousness, and because we're an embodiment, we are tied to the collective. So when we raise our own, we raise the collective. And this will, to be brutally honest, mean that in the coming decades, as the consciousness is raised further, there will be large groups of people who can no longer embody on Earth. It's a brutal reality, but that is the reality. And this has happened in the past. There was a big transition when democracy emerged on Earth. And even though you see many groups of people who are still opposed to democracy and don't want democracy, there were actually groups of people who could no longer embody on Earth as a result of the democratic world emerging. And it's the same with many other things. As humankind has become more and more humane, more and more sensitive to the suffering of others, there have been groups of people who were so completely self-centered that have not been able to re-embody here, and they have had to go elsewhere. You see, of course, still large groups of people who are still into this brutality and inhumanity, but in the coming decades, some of those will also have to go, simply because the world will become more sensitive to the suffering of others. There are phenomena that we take for granted today, or take as unavoidable today, that as we move further into Saint Germain's golden age, they'll not be able to exist here. I mean, the kind of brutality you see from Russia in the war in Ukraine, it has a very limited lifespan. The kind of brutality you see in human trafficking, pedophilia, has a limited lifespan. And so what I'm saying is that what we can do as spiritual people, whether we are concerned about this problem or many other problems, is raise our consciousness, express our Christhood in whatever way is in accordance with our individual life plan. And we each make a little contribution to nudging the collective consciousness higher. And as the collective consciousness is raised, it's kind of like there's a bottom line, right? And as that bottom line is raised, those who will not come up, those who will not transcend themselves, can no longer be in physical embodiment. And that will then, of course, raise the collective consciousness even further when they are not here to pull the collective down. So we are in an upward spiral. I know it doesn't look like it when you look at headlines, but we are in an upward spiral and have been for a long time. That's why we are even able to have this conversation. Because if there wasn't an upward spiral, I would have been hauled before the Catholic Inquisition or the Muslim Inquisition and killed, beheaded, tortured. And most spiritual people would have been the same. So there has been progress. You need to focus on the progress. Especially, I have a playlist about a unique 12-year cycle that started here at New Year's 2025. And as I say in that, it is extremely important for spiritual people to remain positive in the next 12-year cycle, because we will see a lot of extreme outplayings of things, a lot of imbalanced manifestations. But this is the upheaval that breaks the hardened crust so that the collective consciousness can rise, and we can filter out those who will not rise with it.